Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Starboard Portal session. We are going to do a deep dive stemming from our last DEI Starboard Portal. We're going to deep dive with some awesome members of the sailing LGBTQ plus community. I'm going to introduce them in just a second. To start off, my name is Blair Overman. I'm the Siebel Sailors Program Manager with U.S. Sailing. I identify as bisexual. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been with U.S. Sailing for 2 years now and have been doing some work in the DEI space for a little bit of time. And I'm just really pumped to be having this conversation with this wonderful group of people and to talk through some challenges and progress that we've all seen in this industry. So thank you for being here. It's super important. I am going to briefly introduce everyone. After that happens, they will introduce themselves with a little bit more context. And we will talk through some pre-questions that we've put together about challenges, progress in the industry, recommendations that we all have for how you can work to create a welcoming environment in your sailing programs for our community. And we definitely welcome questions from the audience. You can send those in and we have someone feeding those to us. So if I miss your question, many apologies. We will try to follow up with you afterwards. But if there is a question that connects well to our content, I will try to ask it of our panelists. So let's go ahead and get started. We have Oakland Keefe. Oakland was the SASA Tide former secretary. We have Stephanie Helms. Stephanie is the New England Sailing Association president. We have Liam Faudry. Liam is the Rochester Yacht Club junior sailing director. And last but not least, we have Bradley Shook. Bradley is with me at US Sailing. He is our senior instructional designer. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. And Oakland, if I can kick it back to you, do you mind just giving us a deeper introduction of yourself?
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Oakland. I use they, them pronouns, and I identify as transgender non-binary. So I sailed for the past 4 years at the University of Miami, which is part of SASA, the South Atlantic College Sailing Group, and I was secretary for Tide this past year. I have also been a sailing coach for 6 years, and I'm a U.S. Sailing level 1, 2, and 3 certified. And I think that's about it for me.
Oakland, for those who are unfamiliar with Tide, could you just give us a brief explanation of what Tide is?
Yeah, so it's basically the college sailing level of, so it stands for the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Task Force. So we're working on basically those letters and making college sailing specifically a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable space.
That's awesome. For those of you joining us, if you have not checked out Tide, you should Google it. You should check everything out that they've done in the past year and a half. It is quite extraordinary. They have some data they've collected. They've put out reports, and it's really pretty cool. So give them a Google. Liam, can I pass it to you next?
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Liam Faudry. I'm the junior sailing director at the Rochester Yacht Club. I've been at Rochester Yacht Club for 6 years running the program. Prior to that, I did some program director in Lake George, Fairhaven, New York, Oswego, New York. I've raced a bunch of races from the Sydney to Hobart in 2014 to the J24 Worlds in 2012. I've just been grown up sailing and following my big brother's footsteps.
That's awesome. I've gotten to work with your big brother before, so fun, small world.
Sure.
Stephanie, can I pass it to you to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Stephanie Helms. I'm actually the president of the Northeast Sailing Association, which is only part of New England. It's Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, a little piece of New York, like the Lake George region. It's the RSA for the area. I'm a former District 1 governor of J24 class. I'm a sailmaker, have been since 1979, and I sail a lot. I'm still actively sailing J24s and Etchells and various other boats. And I'm trans, and my pronouns are she, her, and I transitioned 23 years ago.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Stephanie told us a little bit ago she really likes to win, so I feel like we should end with that. Bradley, next.
First I want to thank US Sailing for doing this. I'm out in California, and I grew up sailing, mostly the Naval Sabbat, then went into high school and college sailing out on the West Coast. And I'm also a level 1, 2, and 3 coach, and I coach a high school team out here on the West Coast right now. Oh, and my pronouns are him and he, and I'm gay.
Thanks, Bradley. Everyone listening in, I don't think you realize how brave you have to be to sometimes speak in front of a lot of people and share how you identify in this community. It is really pretty cool that everybody here is being so vulnerable. I think it's a super important topic, and we're excited to cap off Pride Month, literally the last day, deep diving into this. Next, I'm going to ask the panelists about any challenges that they faced in the sailing world in their respective areas of sailing. Everybody has a pretty impressive resume, but if they don't mind being a little bit more vulnerable and just sharing what challenges have popped up for you in this space. And Oakland, I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right, I'll start us off, I guess. I mean, a lot of when I was kind of thinking about this question, I thought of how a lot of people have asked, why does gender and sexuality even matter in sailing? Why is this conversation relevant? And how I kind of fathomed that in my mind was that the best sailor or the kid with the most heart will quit if they don't feel trust or accepted by their teammates or coaches. And so specifically for me, having to transition in college, it's not like I came in with this identity and just went forward. I spent basically 3 years as one person and then transitioned and came out. And so for me, the biggest challenge I faced was kind of having to not redo that trust. I didn't lose anybody's trust, but feeling like I needed to trust people and be accepted on a different level because they were accepting who I felt that I had been hiding and who I finally could be. And so for me, I was scared that people wouldn't adjust, a new name or different pronouns, and maybe I'd be on the water racing and hear my old name and be completely taken out of the zone. That was scary, but I had to do it anyway for myself. I had to come out, and the support I received was great. So luckily that wasn't as much of a challenge as it could have been. I didn't have to convince anybody of my identity, which I'm so thankful for. But that challenge is still out there, especially for people who transition in college and don't come in one way or transition after college, like in these time periods where you're changing paths in your life. So that was the biggest challenge for me, but that's kind of the college aspect. So I'll let somebody else speak for them.
Thanks for sharing that perspective and that experience, Oakland. Really appreciate it. Stephanie.
Oh no, I was muted. Now I'm unmuted and I lost my video. Oh no.
You're back.
I'm back. Sorry, guys. I'm a similar path to Oakland, only a long time ago. And the challenges in 1998 through 2002 were a little bit more daunting societally, I think. It was the challenges for anyone transitioning are quite steep. I think it's not bravery so much as it is courage. And bravery is something you might just go ahead and do impulsively, but it takes a lot of it takes a lot of self-analysis and consideration to realize that you need to be who you are. And I think that's something that anybody, whether they're trans or cis or anything, the courage to be yourself is something I hope everybody can find. And I hope that, and I think that some of that courage is what helps a person be excel in whatever endeavor they choose to pursue, including sports, including the sport of sailing. And so the challenges I faced were basically quite similar. Like, wow, that's I thought, oh, and it was sort of like reintroducing myself as you know, being fully who I was to people. And I found that that especially in the sailing community, people were incredibly accepting and welcoming, and I'm everlastingly grateful for that. I'm grateful for the past 23 years, and I have a lot of people to thank for being there for me. Some of the people that I thought, you know, older conservative white guys, you know, would be just not down with us at all, but they were some of my strongest allies, and it gives me a lot of hope, and that sort of thing can be real for more people like me.
I just want to circle back to a quote that now I'm going to write on a Post-it note and put on my wall. But I just love your comment that the courage to be yourself is something that I hope everyone can find, no matter what context. And I just think that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Liam.
Hey, so yeah, so I think you're going to hear a lot of the same things from a lot of us tonight. We're all, you know, in the same boat. I think everyone in our communities, both the LGBTQ and the sailing community, are very open and, you know, caring. And I think we're lucky that we're in such an awesome community, sailing community, and everything else in between. But for me, it was a little strange. I never felt like I could come out to people early on. You know, my friends said they knew and they still loved me for me no matter what. But I ended up going to the other side of the world to find true love, I think, of course. You know, that's, you know, and then I felt more comfortable. I felt like, okay, I'm starting a whole new life on the other side of the world. And, you know, I found my husband, Angus, in Australia, and we came back here, and we've been living here for 6 years, and we got married 5 years ago. And, you know, it's probably the best 5 years of my life. I really do feel that I've been able to be who I wanted to be all along, but was too scared to talk about or even share my life with other people. You know, it just took finding someone that I really loved and going to the other side of the world. You know, and then coming back and running a junior sailing program, it took some time. I never really felt like I could tell anybody. And, you know, some of my coworkers knew who Angus was, never really said, you know, he was my partner or anything. And then, you know, one of the coworkers, I told her I'm getting married on Monday or Sunday. And this was like on Friday. I was like, oh, I can't come to work on Monday, and I'm getting married Sunday. And she's like, what? Like, yeah, I was just too scared to tell anybody. And I wish that I wasn't scared to do it. And now I'm kind of past that stage, and I've moved on, and it's kind of a great feeling to have. And I was always worried what everybody at the yacht club was going to think. And for the most part, I think everyone's been really supportive, and there hasn't been any comments or thrown my way, which I feel thankful for. So it's been an interesting ride, and I'm happy to be here tonight, and thank you, US Sailing, and this awesome panel that we have together.
Thanks for sharing that, Liam. I too tried to go to Australia to find a partner, but I was not as successful as you were. That's a great story. Bradley.
Yeah, like Liam, for the sailing part of it, I was in youth sailing, coaching youth sailing, and it was very, very uncomfortable. You don't know how people are going to react. You're dealing with their kids. There's horror stories of people freaking out about people teaching their kids in normal K through 12 classrooms. And so I really didn't say anything for a really, really long time, after coaching like 5 years even. And then just one summer, one individual other instructor you could tell that they were very open to that type of my decision. And they kind of helped me come out to the staff members, and then slowly through that to the club and everybody else. Like Liam said, I've only really had really great experiences with other people so far in the sailing community. For the most part, there's a couple here and there, but so that's been really great. And then the other thing I was just going to say on the personal level, before I even came out in the sailing space, was just having to come out to my own family and things like that. It took two major tragedies, I'm going to call them. One was a friend that was sexually assaulted and not willing to tell their parents that she was sexually assaulted. And I just couldn't handle that so I started talking to my mom about it, and she was like, you can't hold things up. I want you to tell me anything that ever happens in your life. And that opened the door for me to be able to talk to my parents about this. And then the last thing was Prop 8. And that's when I officially came out to everybody else. Prop 8 is a prop that took gay marriage away in California by the vote. And luckily it was struck down. Yeah, so that's the story.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think, our personal experiences are interwoven, however much you want to just categorize things. So super important to kind of hear and learn about people's stories as you're getting to know folks. So thank you. I do want to add in
Blair, can I add something really quick?
Oh yeah, go.
Well, I think what a lot of us have in common is that nobody or there aren't that many instances or any that we really share about people, actually verbally harassing or speaking out against us. But the fact that there's not really a conversation about it is what makes it feel like we're not accepted. So for college, even if you have a team and there's no trans members on it, but there's all this legislature happening, like banning trans women in sports, if you just open that conversation on your team, you're already embracing your openness to the situation. So just being silent and not talking about it creates that atmosphere of not being accepted, and it's why so many people hide. So if you're in a club, a team, just being open and having these conversations, whether or not someone in that space identifies as LGBTQ, that's what's important, and that's what will make other people feel more accepted.
I found visibility is a double-edged sword. I spent. It's rather difficult to, unlike sexual orientation, which one can be a little bit more discreet, shall we say, at least in terms of the closet walls are more impenetrable. But transitioning is a very visible thing one does, and it's if one does, very few do, because it's just not all that common. If you must transition and you do transition, you out yourself immediately. It's also really comfortable after transition to sort of slide back into the woodwork and not talk about these issues. But by doing that, you quite frequently just make the situation worse for people who don't understand, or who would say, if you asked someone in conversation, say at the bar after the race, well, if they start getting into a heated conversation about certain topics, you could say, have you ever met a trans woman? And, what do you do? And when they say no, I go, you have now. The person-to-person contact makes a big difference in people's lives. I mean, it really causes them to think a little bit about who we are. We're just people, just like you. We're just people. We're trying to do a job. We're trying to participate in a sport. We're trying to raise the level of the sport. We're trying to, whether we're a PRO on a race committee boat, or we're a competitor trying to go faster than everybody else. That's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to campaign. We're not trying to be anything other than good people and good competitors.
Well put. That, I think, is a perfect segue into us talking a little bit about progress we've seen, or good, positive things that we've felt and been in touch with in the industry. And I just want to go off something that I kind of heard in a thread through both Stephanie and Oakland's comments, and that is that, sometimes you advocate for yourself when you can and when you feel comfortable. And then sometimes it is really hard to be the different person in the room who is advocating for themselves and trying to create the change, but is experiencing the pushback of change creation. And sometimes you really need people around you to speak up, like a coach, Oakland, and address the topic and just prepare the way for someone that might need that in any diversity context. And I think that's where progress can really be pushed forward. So I'm just interested to hear, where are things going well that you can see from your perspective in your different areas of sailing? What is working? What is feeling good? What is making you feel hopeful? Anyone is welcome to jump in.
Oh, do you want to go, Liam?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm really hopeful of the next generation, because I feel like a lot of the younger generation that's younger than me knows how to just be inclusive. It's just in their DNA. It feels like it doesn't feel like we have to kind of train or rework ourselves, or they have to rework. And they're all very just welcoming from what I can tell. So that's a really big positive for me. So yeah, Liam.
I was gonna say the same thing, Bradley. I feel working with kids, I just feel like they are really their generation. I think being on, YouTube and Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok, they see a lot, and they're actually pretty open and really are caring and supportive. And I think working with this group of kids, even from ages 5, 6, all the way up into the high school and college, they just see a lot of good things coming out from them. I know sometimes people give a bad rep, but I think on social things, they're generally speaking are a really good group of kids coming up. And, I think, it also then stems back to maybe their parents are a bit more supportive, and then they can be letting their kids think the way they want. So, I don't know what the real answer is or true answer, but I do feel, like Bradley said, that the youth and the next generation are really, really supportive and caring group of people, which is really exciting to see.
you all have given me hope. I'm 67 years old. I mean, and you are the next generation. You all have given me tremendous hope. You know, I compete against now in my local J24 fleet and my local Etchels fleet. I compete against kids that went through the sailing program I worked for in 2009, 10, 11. And these kids are in their late 20s, early 30s right now. And it was the joy of a lifetime to work with them as they were going through high school sailing, through junior sailing, that kind of thing. I mean, the hope is just a constant thing, and it's and there are hopes realized in U.S. sailing's attitude towards towards our participation in the sport, and always have, and really, I have really always has been, at least as vis-a-vis my experience. Also within the industry, I mean, I've been, like I said, I'm a sailmaker. I've been doing it for 1979. I'm old and feeble, and I can't do the math. But you know, I have friends and colleagues that I still work with and have known since my early mid-20s, and we still work superbly well together. So I think our sport has just a wonderful range of very kind people who just want to get the job done.
I agree. And to just touch on like an actual college sailing perspective, there aren't any regulations in college sailing saying there aren't any like trans regulations. So like trans men can compete either in co-ed or women's, wherever they feel most comfortable. Same thing with trans women. And that's really important, that however someone identifies should be able to compete where they want. And so I'm just really happy that that's the case for college sailing, and that the college sailing is actually starting to acknowledge that, because it's not really written anywhere, but they're trying to like get it out there that whoever identifies is like, you can choose where you want to compete, you know.
Just from a pro sailing aspect of things, that's not the case at the Olympic level.
Right, Olympics. That's the thing. Olympics isn't
not the case. That's there are very there are
even
rules
in
and regulations
NCAA rules
and NCAA. There are rules and regulations with regard to physical transition and medical transition, that stuff that one has to comply with in order to compete. And I don't want to get into a disquisition about the merits or demerits of each little thing medically, because first of all, I'm not a medical person, but I do have my own personal experience, and there hormone replacement therapy changes a lot.
The other thing that I was gonna say about some positives, there was an article that showed up on my newsfeed today from CNBC about 4 ways to tell if your potential employer is LGBTQ plus friendly during the interview process. And when I came to US Sailing 8 years ago, 8 years ago, I flew across the country and met a bunch of people I didn't know, and didn't know the state very well. It's a small little state. And I had no clue if these people were going to be accepting or not. And I had to pull a colleague aside, or a future colleague aside, and ask the question. But I had to find the right one. I met maybe 30 people during my interview process, and I really like scoped each one kind of to see were they open to it, what they were, and then kind of had to figure out how to ask the question. And luckily now US Sailing like did a logo change during Pride that helps people know that they're more accepting. So that would have helped me for sure be able to feel more comfortable. And obviously with a change in the logo, there needs to be more than just the change of the logo. But I do think you need to learn how to crawl before you can walk, before you can run, before you can sprint. So I think we're moving in the right direction, I think, in a lot of ways in the sailing as a sport.
That's awesome. I live in North Carolina, work for US Sailing remotely, get to travel back to Rhode Island every now and then and get to see all the Seabold centers all over the country. So it's really interesting to, I have a master's in anthropology and sociology. So it's interesting to take little tidbits of temperature of this all over the country and see how geographical regions respond differently. And I kind of nerd out about it. I can definitely say I have been in jobs in the sailing world in North Carolina where I was not at all accepted. I was told that it was a very good thing that I was dating a man and not a female. That if I were dating a female, it would be easy for them to let me go because it would be outwardly apparent that I was queer. So US Sailing for me has been a breath of fresh air. I've almost been fired from 2 jobs or excused out the door because of my orientation. So I also think that's kind of a product of the geography, and not everyone in the South feels that way, but a lot of people do. And I'm from North Carolina and I love it and I want to be here. And sometimes it's scary. So I just wanted to share that, not to temper the hopeful approaches you all have given, but just to put a little like regional spin on reality that we all still face in this industry. So thank you for letting me share that. I think next, it would be really interesting to talk through from your perspectives in the sailing world. So Oakland, college sailing, Liam as a junior program director, Bradley, from working with US Sailing, seeing the perspective you do, and also as a high school coach, Stephanie, sailmaker, touching the world in those areas, running your association, the pro sailing that you've done. Tell us what it takes to create a welcoming environment that you think people could start to think about who are tuning in tonight, and maybe could take home some suggestions and start to work on those. And you talked about crawling, Bradley, like how do we start crawling? How do we get to running? Stephanie, you want to go first?
Yeah, I really think it boils down to do your job. I think that, if you're concentrating on it, and nobody does a perfect job every single day of the week. I certainly don't. I get myself wrapped up in stuff and lose track, but I do my best. I try to do the best I can. But if you can just concentrate on doing your job, whether it's on the boat or it's coordinating stuff with regional sailing, or running a regatta as a regional race officer, or getting the stuff sewn on a daily basis, even if it's 100 degrees out, or prepping a boat or anything. It's just do your job and be, you're just a person. I mean, that's what anybody expects when you're your queerness is not the issue, because it shouldn't, nobody's gonna be depending on you to be sufficiently queer or unqueer if they have a goal. And if the goal is to win a sailboat race, then you're gonna help them do that. And they think you can, they're gonna ask you to do that, whether you're queer or not, whether you're trans or not. I mean, I think people will invest in you what you invest in them. You invest your trust that and your confidence that you can do this stuff. And it's a lot easier for people to be there when they're being themselves. And people, I found I got so much better at what I did after I finally threw off the chains of years and years and years of wishing and hoping and denying and mostly being afraid. I was very afraid for a very long time.
Mm. How
And
can
I was taught to be afraid. So it's, but you get over that, and suddenly those chains are gone, and you can commit to do what needs to be done better.
you mentioned that you perform best when you can be yourself, and so I'm wondering, how can people welcoming you in to the racing environment they've created best help you be yourself? What can they do to ensure that you feel like you can be you?
What you do to anybody who you'd like to have as a crew. Don't misgender me. That'd be one thing. Don't dead name me. I mean, that really actually only applies to people that knew me in a previous lifetime. Don't assume that I'm going to be any different than anyone else you'd like to have contributing to your efforts or being involved with something that's that you have an interest in. I mean, just don't assume. I mean, and most people do sailing as pastime, and it's like nobody goes out to have a bad time. So why would you hang around with somebody that you absolutely can't stand? It's like, fine. I mean, there are people that absolutely can't stand me, not because I'm trans, but because I'm a jerk. Not too many, but there's, everybody's got that, that certain one person is like just as soon not hang out with, but that's
Are you
fine.
competitive,
People.
Stephanie? Are you competitive, Stephanie?
Yes.
She likes to win.
I hate to lose. I hate losing. I actually, the headshot of me on Insta was taken by my friend Rob Windsor, who's also a professional sailor, and he lives in the greater Portland area, and he's more competitive than I am.
Oh,
he's a class 40 sailor. He sails across oceans and whatnot, and he's a great crewmate. The two of us really click when we're sailing because we both hate to lose.
This kind of plays off what Oakland was saying earlier about having the conversation. And a lot of times people are scared even myself, are scared to talk about things they don't know because they don't want to offend somebody. And all of our terms are constantly kind of changing and evolving, and we're all learning. And just to be open to being corrected and taking that feedback in a positive way, and then trying to be better and try and use the proper pronouns the next time and things like that. I think that's how you build a welcoming environment. I said on our last call, even I get tripped up on all the things that are changing, and there is no like little book that we all get to read every night and get all caught up. So it just takes vulnerability to be in the space with us. We're vulnerable. You got to be vulnerable a little bit. On a yacht club organizational level, to make the sport more inclusive. At US Sailing, something I started doing, well, I didn't do it at US Sailing, it's more US Power Boating, but it's the same company. Anytime there was a form that had male, female, I would put more information there so that we were being more inclusive. And so when you have yacht club applications for becoming a member, becoming for the regatta, whatever it is, regatta registration, being more open on those registrations to, it's just something very simple, but it means a lot to people. It means that you're welcoming your you want them in your sport. It's opening that conversation, like Oakland said.
I think respect too, just respecting everybody. Doesn't matter who they are. I mean, if we were all blind walking around, we wouldn't know what other people look like, and you just have to, go by the way they were talking to you, and respect. I think respect has to go a long ways. And one of the things the other night, Bradley and I talked on the phone for a long time. I think it was kind of refreshing to talk to him, and just, we were talked about a lot of topics, and we were quite vulnerable about talking about things. And, Bradley brought up, sometimes using the wrong terminology, not knowing what to say. You don't want to offend someone. Try to understand where they're coming from, walk in their shoes, and respect everybody. I think respect goes a long way. So I think we really should. Doesn't matter who they are, what they are. Let's all get out on the water, help each other out. We want to get people sailing. I think that's really the most important thing here, is getting people on the water and not letting people be afraid or bullied or pushed around. Being part of a junior sailing program and working with kids every day, you still see some kids being bullied, both, online and in the classroom or on the water. And, you got to try to stop that as quickly as possible, and, try to reason with them. And once you do sit down and talk to them, I think you've let them know what they said or what they did isn't right, that they understand. And I think everyone needs to do that and take a step back and look at, who they're talking to, and try to be there to help everybody, lift everybody up.
The last thing I was going to say on this is I actually have a really hard time doing this. But when people make disparaging comments about other types of people, it's the other. When you're sailing, or try to say something like, hey, that's not cool. We don't want that kind of language on our boat. We're inclusive. We want to have everyone, even though there might not be anybody on that boat that is queer. It's really important to just always have a welcoming environment, because you don't know. Like, I didn't, choose to be gay. I was born gay, at least that's my feeling. And so I sailed on many boats where things were said when I was younger, and that nobody knew. I didn't even know. So just being open and trying not to say things.
This is great. I have a couple questions coming in from the audience, so I'm going to ask one. How does U.S. Sailing best institute best practices so we look welcoming to those job applicants who want to know how welcoming we are? And I think that could go for anyone. How do you respectfully recruit? How do you make yourself, in writing or in a job posting, look welcoming and look enticing?
I think you can straight out declare that you are, among other things. Basically say, yeah, and say our intent is to provide a safe workspace for people of all sorts, without regard to sex, race, gender identity, or sexual orientation. I mean, you could say that and mean it and show it, by not tolerating behavior that's diminishing to the people that you're reaching out to.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of naming and welcoming people, just like you would welcome a person by knowing their name and saying hi to them. I think it's sometimes important to list out what we're inclusive of and what we are going to support with, by name. And
what you won't tolerate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, we won't tolerate bigotry of any sort.
Mm-hmm.
This is a small thing, but on forms where it says like male, female, other, or like it lists races and then says other, just like get rid of other and then have a blank space where someone can write in. That's what I think is also useful.
This is a perfect example of I put other on a form. When I first started changing the forms at US Sailing, it was male, female, transgender, other. And now I know to remove other from those forms. So something simple as that, being open to new feedback, is just how we can all coexist.
You can get rid of transgender too if you want.
Yeah, I'll do that too.
I mean, just other would be fine. I mean, a binary trans person will identify as male or female. A non-binary person may not, and still be trans. So you can, what do you want to? How many ones do you want us to check off?
Right. Good perspective. I know something we do at the Siebel program is all of our coaches introduce and use pronouns for themselves, and that immediately tells the kids that we're here, we're welcome, in addition to stating how much we want to support every single person, no matter who they are, and kind of going through some of that list. But using pronouns right off the bat is helpful.
And a lot of people will say, well, why is that important? And my response is because it's something deeply felt. Just like your name, you wouldn't feel all that hot if someone was going around calling you some rando name that they made up. It's something deeply felt. It's something that's part of it. That we all take in. Every human I've ever met takes in as something that they feel deeply. So it's just a simple matter of respect to not question the authenticity. I mean, if you question the authenticity of somebody's name, somebody's pronouns, you're questioning their authenticity as a human being. That's not fair. It's not good.
I would even add, as someone who uses gender neutral pronouns, for a cis or trans person to introduce themselves with their pronouns automatically makes me feel safer to use they them pronouns, because I know that these people are more likely to not kind of question that or be surprised or ask me about it. They'll just understand. And so that's very important. Like, especially there's comments that go around, especially like on the younger age, from like older people saying like only trans people have pronouns, and that's not the case. Everybody has pronouns, and the cis person has pronouns. They're still cis, obviously. But so from my perspective, especially cis people using pronouns, cis and straight people using pronouns, just like makes me feel safer in that space.
I have a very good non-binary friend who will use different pronouns based on how they feel that day. And I think it's really important to have the space to do that.
I have friends who go any all. That's fine.
Right. Right. Another question coming in: why can't you just let the person fill in their answer versus giving people a selection to choose from? So it sounds like a little more context on, checking boxes. Or not.
Yeah, no, well, sometimes like there's machines that are reading things, so it gets a little complicated. So it's faster if the machines read them individually, and then it spits out 3 that maybe are whatever the number is that have a different pronoun or gender.
Perhaps someday there will come a time when the gender binary goes away for the vast majority of people. But for the vast majority of people, there is a slot that they will put themselves in, which is why they don't understand why anyone would choose to put themselves in some other slot. that's one of the odd things about the trans experience, which is experienced by maybe 0.6% of the world's population. I mean, I don't want to. I'm not a trans revolutionary by any means. I was like, there is no trans agenda. It's like we live in a world where the vast majority of people, this stuff never troubles them, and I'm fine with that. I don't want to challenge somebody's. I don't personally want to challenge somebody's inner sense of self any more than I want mine challenged. So I'm perfectly happy to throw out the normatives and let it go at that. I'm also
My thought is
happy
also
checking the female
sorry,
box.
my thought is also that if you're actually asking this question, like you need an answer, like why would you ask someone their gender if you don't need to know? Just a thought. So if you're really needing to know this, then you should be open enough to want to know how that person really identifies if they feel like they don't fit into one of those boxes.
Great answers. We have another question. Where discrimination has been seen or felt in sailing today, both in clubs and regattas? Anyone want to speak to that?
I'll just go off like something I said before, which I saw this question before, so I kind of answered it and said another question. But basically, like I said, when you're stepping on a boat, you're, like Stephanie says, you're there to do your job. And there's chit chat that happens in between the water cooler talk and whatnot. But it's great if it stays water cooler talk. But when it becomes locker room talk, it becomes kind of awkward. Even if it's just male, female on the boat in that respect, it could just get really awkward. And depending on what you're saying and what you're putting out there. And so that's like, I think where like regattas can get a little bit awkward for the queer community, at least in my life. In college, like I told them on the phone call, I sailed with a crew member that actively voted to take my right to get married to who I love away. And it was a really big deal for me. And I didn't know what to do. And so it was huge. And so I'm glad that they told me their position, and we were open enough to share their position, but it also was, I needed to figure out what to do with where their position was. So yeah.
That's always a tricky thing to negotiate. I mean, as I said, some of my dearest friends have political positions that, yeah, directly impact or could potentially, this particular choice leads to policies that could directly impact my life, as in terms of identification documents, et cetera, and so forth, as was tried earlier on. But I figure it's my job to try to convince them that, it's like, well, please consider this, when you're making those decisions, and just bit by bit. I'm not going to change somebody's ideology overnight, but I can be in their lives, and maybe that'll give them pause, or at least consider. Or better yet, if they're in that position, they can influence the course of change in government way better than I can, if their side's in power. So if there's a position of a particular political party that is inimical to my interests, and they care about my interests, I feel no compunction to ask them to write their representatives, senators, and say, hey, look, I agree with you with everything else, but this is bogus stuff. it's strictly harmful to people that are just trying to live. And friends of mine are trying to do that. So let's don't do that.
One thing I was gonna say that I caught myself saying earlier in the conversation, I said male female boat combo, where really I should have said multi-gender boat. So just throwing that out there.
We're all still learning,
Exactly.
always. Any other places where you're finding discrimination in the sailing world?
At least in college and youth sailing, what I found most of the discrimination towards gay and trans people was before I was out, and people didn't think there was a gay or trans person around them. So they're just spewing out their, that should have been bubble thoughts. And, if someone comes out like, oh, I would have never said that if I had known. Okay, well, nowadays there's definitely going to be someone who is probably gay or trans in that space. So whether or not you know it, you should think twice before you say something.
I feel like it's worth mentioning there are still, clubs throughout the country who limit membership based on gender, might limit membership based on what partners are allowed or not allowed. I'm not intimately familiar, but it is worth saying that is still a discriminatory factor that people face in this country. And I do think, we've all had some great experiences with our friends, fellow sailors, maybe even changing some mindsets, but there are still some people who really are offended by this conversation. And Liam, I don't know if you want to speak to any of the comments that came, as this was even just being social media'd before tonight.
So yeah, we're just, I think still people aren't going to understand, even though they might not watch or they might watch, they probably still won't understand what we go through every day, just being who we are. I think it's, I still think that it's, I don't know. I think, I had a long conversation with Bradley about this the other night because I got pretty upset and heated about it. I just felt that we need to, whoever we are, just support each other and not tear each other down. And when we're posting things on social media, it's not just us seeing it, it's the world seeing it. And it's people are allowed to say what they want, I think, but you got to be respectful of what other people are and how they feel and who they are. And to go on, if your religion, like Stephanie said, people can believe whatever they want, but I don't think you can push religion on people. I don't think we're not trying to push our sexuality on anybody. We're just trying to be open and talk about who we are and make it a more normal thing so the youth can feel more comfortable. Anybody, even older people, we can all feel the same and we can all feel comfortable in our skin and just be respectful and of everyone and caring and supportive. So I don't know what else to say about that, but I just thought it was, we should be working as a whole, as a sailing community, better to build each other up. And watching some of those posts, they're free to say what they want, but it's not a good look, I don't think. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
That was perfectly said.
To be honest, I think that one of the, if you're talking about, it's not discrimination exactly, but I think misogyny still has, it plays far too large a role in the sport of sailing. Both before and after transition, I hear comments that would make me absolutely cringe about, it's like, oh, well, she's not really a girl. It's like, I can kid, I'm kidding me.
We're getting saucy. It's all right.
Well, you know, I mean, it's just, and that sort of thing. It's you know, really, you're really, it's just because somebody's kicking your rudder doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, that, like, they're not who they say they are. It's like, really. So I think I think that is a problem. I think there may be, you know, there may be still pockets of race discrimination. I mean, I think we live in this society, and those things are things. And they're gonna be present in every single endeavor we encounter. And it's just, what are you gonna do? The only thing you can do is fight it and try to work against it. But
So-
yeah, I mean, but I'm proud of the sport of sailing, and we've got our president is most of the leadership, a whole bunch of the leadership in the sport are female, or, you know, female presenting, etc. And I just think it's great. It's been a sea change. It's the old boys network is not entirely there any longer. And it's happened over probably the last 30 years. It's been an evolution, real evolution, and a great one, in my opinion.
Yeah, even
No,
the
I
scale
hate-
of U.S. sailing is very mixed along gender lines, and it's really nice to be in space where there's a lot of diverse thought processes.
I hate to do this because I feel like we could talk for 2 more hours and it would go by very quickly, but we've hit our time limit. I just want to thank you all for being here with me and for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences and your wisdom. This was a really fun conversation. Anyone who tuned in, if you have questions maybe you didn't feel comfortable asking that you'd like to email, you're welcome to email me, Blair Overman at ussailing.org. I would be happy to distribute to the panelists if there's a specific question for them. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate you asking good questions and wanting to learn more. So just thank you, everyone. We hope maybe we can come back and do a part 2.
Thanks, guys. Good night.